Okay, good morning, everybody. It's that time. It's time to get underway. Today, we're going to be having a look at the tax certificates for the 2021-02, so the main submission for the previous tax year. Just some preparation and a quick overview on the actual submission. Just a word on that, it's fairly difficult to get screenshots of the SARS software, not because they're difficult to get, but SARS tends to blur everything behind the screen that you're currently on. So it does make life a little bit more challenging. So if there's on that side of it, there's a fewer screenshots than what I would probably have liked to have done. So today we'll be going over just a quick overview of what the submission is involved, what information we suggest that you try and keep up to date or keep current, and you make sure that you try and get that during your onboarding processes and that sort of fun stuff. How do we extract the information from Psiber, which I'll be going through, and then how do we extract that information from IRP, which Charlene will be going through. And then just once you've got that information out, how do you actually upload it into EasyFile? And if there are any errors, how do you have a look at what those errors are? So first of all, our assumptions for today are that you have an EMPSA or your EMP501s or some form of manual reconciliation so that you'll be able to verify that your payroll is correct or your payrolls are correct for the tax year, obviously up to and including February 2021. And that you have a basic understanding of how to navigate around the payroll system that you're using and of course the EasyFile system. So this is our annual submissions, unlike the interim submission which we did around August. So here we do a full employee validation, so the same as the interim submission. And the ETR claiming cycle for you in this situation ends in February, and we can only make adjustments therefore for the last 6 months, which means from September to February, you can make any adjustments that you need to make in this 501 process. Anything from March to August cannot be made. Sorry, that is a mistake on your screen there. ETR for March to August cannot be made. No change. Oh, sorry, there we go. No changes to the ETR for March to August can be made in the 501 process. Okay, so if there is an error there, you're going to have to start a separate process with SARS to try and rectify that. They don't mind so much if you're reducing your ETR. Obviously, there's penalties and interest involved, but they do really dislike it if you try and increase your ETR. Okay, during the last year, there's been some uncertainty with how the ETR reporting on the tax certificates was going to work because of the reduced requirements for COVID. We saw some of it come through in the interim submission, but in this submission, we now have a code 3 on interface code 7005, which is a very technical way of saying SARS have implemented a small change which allows you to use an indicator 3 on that interface code, which will remove the age verification, which is what the COVID allowed. That type 3 is only allowed for the months during the hard lockdown, and if you try and use it beyond that, it will reject that 3. So it's just something to be aware of when you're doing the validations. Often your payroll system or perhaps even SARS will say that those values are not allowed because the person is over 29. Okay, we've also got to remember that we should be reporting our TERS payments to our staff. Hopefully you had your payroll configured correctly and you reported all of those. But given the uncertainty around the financial aspects, it's prudent that you try and get your stuff together as soon as possible to give yourself as much time in case you have any issues as possible before your submission deadline. So the submission deadline is the last day of this month, so it's 31st. So at this point, there is just a little under 2 weeks remaining to get your submissions in the bank. Okay, so what are our common problems? And a little bit of color on the screen. Generally, what we would suggest is that anything that I have done there in blue or in green is to try and preempt this. So anything in blue is something that you could have done before, or you can do before your next submission, is to get employee reports out to line managers or to whoever holds that employee information to be able to make sure it's up to date and accurate. As you'll see later on in the slides, and I'm not going to read the slides out, but basically as you go through these, you'll see that employee name, ID number, tax reference numbers, all these mandatory fields are available. You don't need to collect them 5 minutes before submission. So if you can get all of that information in and validate it before your submission time, you can make your life a lot easier. You can give yourself a lot less grey hair. So some of the information specifically that is looked for is obviously name and ID number, but one that's often overlooked is the residential and postal addresses. And these have to be completed in SARS's format. It's quite an onerous format, it's about 7 fields excluding the country code. So those have to be completed, and there are no shortcuts around this. If you have no street number, it will fail. If you don't have a street name, it will fail. You need to have either city or suburb completed. It's one of the little things that you can get away with, but ideally you want that address to be as accurate as possible. If SARS needs to send notifications to people, they need to know where. Okay, so on the payroll, what are we going to be looking for? With ID number and passport number. And remember, if you have a passport number, there's more fields that are required. You're required to know the country of origin. You need to know when the passport was issued and when it will expire. Okay, so those are quite important. So an ID number, you just need the number, but a passport number, there's additional fields that need to be completed. Probably the most onerous thing to get for an employee is their tax reference number, or TRN. SARS have made great strides in allowing you to be able to get hold of these numbers, and they've placed the onus firmly on the employer to get these numbers for the employees. However, they don't allow you to make the phone call to SARS. The employee still has to either go into SARS, or they have to phone in, or they can do the registration if they have the e-filing profile, which most people should have these days, so that they can do their own submission. If they have an e-filing profile, they will have the tax reference number and they can get it for you. So it's another one that SARS have for a very long time been warning that they're going to start to become a little more heavy-handed with. So if you can, please get all your tax reference numbers into your payroll system so that you don't have any issues. Other common problems are that your EMP5 or your EMP501s don't balance to what your payroll information has. In this submission, it's important to check your SDL holiday is showing up on the payroll correctly as zeros. Hopefully you don't have a situation where your payroll is calculated, it's the right word, calculated SDL, because the SARS won't accept the SDL value on your certificates at this stage. So you're going to have to then edit the certificates to bring that SDL value out, or to remove that portion of the SDL value, obviously not the whole SDL value. Also, if your company has used the 35% PAYE with deferral, remember that your payroll may not look exactly like your submission with Psiber or your 201s or your EMP5, because the payroll in itself would not have handled that 35% deferral. That would have had to have been handled outside of payroll. Important to note, though, that the total PAYE for the year should still match. So even if you took into account the 35% deferral in the COVID months, you would have paid less PAYE, and in the last couple of months, you would have paid more PAYE than was declared by payroll. Okay, so if you have a situation where your ETR values don't match, there are some reports you can use to check, and you can go back and verify. But it's important to try and check your ETR values on a monthly basis, because they can get very difficult to adjust, or very difficult from a SARS perspective to get resolved. And sometimes it's a really straightforward thing that somebody's ID number is not validating, or it could be something far more serious, like an incorrect ID number was entered and someone who shouldn't have got ETR has got ETR. So it's important to check that as often as you possibly can, preferably on a monthly basis, so that when you actually come to submission time, you don't have any real issues. What reports can we use? All the bits and pieces that I've spoken about already. So here's where we're going to get a little bit into the Psiber space itself, into the eTalk space. For your master information, there is a nice report called the Tax Certificate Exemptions Report. And it's a standard report. You can actually run this at any time of the year, and you can use it just up to the point of where you are. And it doesn't display you values, so it doesn't tell you when your values are not allocated correctly. But what it will do is it will give you a very good idea if people's addresses are missing, if they're missing tax reference numbers, IDs don't validate, all that kind of stuff, so that you can preempt and get through this, and you can get the information in that you need to have. How do we get it? You're obviously going to log into the payroll software. You're going to go to your reporting section. Either scroll through the list of reports or start typing in the search bar, tax certificate exceptions. You're going to click through, select the payroll that you're looking for, select your period type. Now, for your period type, in this instance, we're assuming that you're going to be working with the 2021 submission. So you're going to select the type as tax year and then previous tax year. Obviously, at the moment, your payroll is processed within a few months of this year already. So if you run it as current tax year, it's going to show you 2022's data, not 2021. Or alternatively, there will be a list of all the years that are available to the system, and you can just select the year directly. So this is the website. So select all years. So the second is the next screen. So under the reporting type, you're going to select year end. If you pass with the interim one, you would have remembered that little drop down menu over here. This one here also has the ability to just do the interim submission, so the first 6 months, or alternatively, you can just do up to the current month. So it will process everything up to the current month. The report that is generated will look something along these lines. Obviously, we've some data here so that you're not seeing all this information about a company. And basically, it's telling us there's a certificate with an income tax number and no income tax number rather, and there's mandatory data missing. So for this one, there's only 4 tax reference numbers missing. You can very easily go back and get those tax reference numbers and get this section sorted. With the master information, it's often easier to let the employees update their own stuff. So to that end, we can use the personal information update form. You can use this to collect missing information or allowing the employees to update that without going into a whole lot of detail. And that's also now starting to become more and more of a requirement for Copy Act, so that you are required to make sure that the data that you have for the employee, obviously that you're allowed to have it and that you're using it for the right purpose, but also that it is current. And this is a way that you can start to implement that as well. To run the report, same thing. You're going to log into the payroll software. You're going to go to the reporting section. You're going to search for the personal information update form. You're going to click next, and you're going to cycle through. You can either select all the employees, or you can just select 1 or 2 that you have an issue with. That gets generated. Something along this. There we go. It looks something along these lines, where it's got the employee name, ID number, and all of the details that are on the system. That's fairly nice if you're just looking for somebody that didn't put a street number, you can highlight that for them and say, I need that street number. The EMP501, 501, and 501 ETR reconciliation. You can use these reports to check that your declared values match up to your EMPSA or to your, once you actually loaded the file into EasyFile, to be able to check that your 501 as per SARS matches up to what you're expecting in the payroll. Remembering that this year we've got some challenges with ETR, we've got challenges with PA1 deferrals, and we've got challenges with SDL holiday. So those are things that you need to be aware of and you need to take into account when you're checking these. Remember, your SDL holiday should be in your payroll file, but your 35% deferral may not be in your employee you're looking at the ETI, you see that there's an issue. Also, you can use this the 501 ETI recon to allow you to see the total amount of ETIs being claimed by payroll for the periods. And you can use that with the that will come up next week, which is the ETI detail. And then you can verify your claim based on those two. Be accurately reflected the 201s. And if it has been accurately reflected on the 201s, it will be accurately reflected on the EMP501 that's been extracted from the system. As you can see, the STL holiday is missing here. Missing is zero. This is probably not the right word. So the STL holiday is in play. And the total is off. No, I will not have the deferral. I think I've said that a few times already. I'll get you your question in a moment. Yeah. So this is the ETI reconciliation report. We're looking to see the ETI values. This column match up to the detail which comes in the next report. And you're checking that your net KYE, so the total value of the KYE, is the same as what was paid. ETI detail report. So this gives us the detail of all the people that were allocated. Obviously, excluding the COVID times, it should be less than 12. The number of ETI claims should be 24 or less. Obviously, the remuneration should be in the range 2,000 to 6,000. Breakdown of all the ETI claims, the total value of the ETI, which will then refer back to the EMP501 and the EMP501 recon. So tie all those reports together to make sure that your payroll and your 501 recon all tie back nicely. Okay, how do we actually get to our certificates? So basically what we do here is we log into the payroll software, we go to human capital management, we go to payroll management, we go to process certificates. At this stage, it's just done the year-end certificates. If you're doing interim, you select your tax share, you select your reference number, and if you have multiple payrolls with the same reference number, they will all be listed in the box. If you don't, then you just select the one that you're looking for. It's very sensitive this morning. Okay. So when you now select your employees, at the bottom here, you step up and select employees and create certificates. Go into a little bit more detail. Once it's completed, you can move to the tab that says certificates, and you can create your certificate file. So you click on the box that says create certificate file. Once you have your file, you'll be able to download it. Please make a note of where you downloaded it, which you obviously need to reference that when you get into the easy file interface. Okay, so at this stage, we're going to assume, again, you've now got your file. You have a file with no real errors on it as far as the payroll data is concerned. You've validated and you've checked that your EMP501 is correct, your STL is all happy campers, and you're going to now load it into your easy file software. So you load the software, you do your login as you would normally do, and then from the left-hand menu, you're going to select the import, export payroll file. And then obviously you are doing an import, so you're going to click on the import file. And then you're going to then follow the prompt and you're going to navigate to your file that you downloaded from payroll software. And you can There's a bunch of menus that, or not menus, items that you have to click on to say yes, you want to import and all those kind of things, but you just follow the prompts. If your file imports cleanly, it will report that to you and your file will have imported. If there are any issues, you can go down to the utilities in the left-hand menu, import payroll file log, which will then list all the files that you downloaded. So there you go to utilities and there. So we have to default. You click on utilities menu item, and then find import payroll file item, import payroll file log item. Click on that and it will display your imports. Then gives you a status on the side. And if it's failed, so for argument's sake, this one has failed, you can double click it and it will give you a report of everything that has caused you an issue. Obviously, those then need to be updated. If it's addresses and that kind of thing, you would update our payroll and re-extract your disk. If there's more complicated errors, you may choose to edit on the disk, but obviously that takes a little bit of technical skill that's not covered by this training. But generally, you would update the things that need to be updated in payroll and then re-extract your disk and re-upload it. Once your file has been loaded and you're ready to enter your declarations, you can select the declarations from the left-hand menu, select the correct submission period, and you click on the request. Now, the way that we do it is we generally always request the SARS information, simply because it's the cleanest way to make sure that you have the same data that SARS has, and then validate that your 201s and your 201s have run correctly, and that your 501 will be balanced correctly. To do that, when you click on the request, you'll have to log in with your e-filing username and password, which has access to the 501 profile. And once that's done, it will pre-populate your 501 with all of the information that SARS has about that 501. So if there's ETR, it will pre-populate. If the declarant details are completed correctly, it will pre-populate. You will need to update a few fields like SRC code, perhaps. You will have to select whether or not the company has diplomatic indemnity, and you will normally have to enter the payroll software section. So it asks you for what's the payroll software called and what is the payroll package called. So you just select from the list. There's a list of the payroll softwares that SARS is aware of. If you're using Excel and you're doing it all manually, then there is actually even an option for that to say other. Right, so you now have a populated EMP501, and the only thing that you need to enter is the actual values paid. So that's why we needed that recon or the EMP201s, or perhaps an EMPSA, where you can see the actual total value. So that's the value for UIF, PCL, and PA1E, and it's that on the right-hand side of the screen. And as you're entering that, your 501 should balance when you get to the end. Now, we're not concerned with 1 or 2 or a few cents, because SARS doesn't really consider those cents either when you upload your certificate file. So even in your certificate to the EMP501 values, you may notice a small difference, anything up to about 99 cents either way, so the positive or negative 99 cents. In each of the UIF, SDL, and PA1 columns is perfectly acceptable. SARS literally drops the cents portion of your certificates when it's uploaded. So there is that to it. Once you have balanced your file, entered all your values, you're comfortable that your certificate's balanced. Now, hopefully, all of this was all pre-work. So you've done all of your balancing, you know all of these things beforehand. So when you get to this stage, you're on just literally entering 12 figures, checking your balancing, checking that all your details on the 501 are correct, your declarant details and all their contact details are correct. And then you're going to go to the submit button. So along the top, you'll have save and you'll have a file button. Now, the difference difference between save and file. The save just makes a save, so perhaps you need to go get a cup of coffee and you step away from your machine and you don't want it in an easy file with all this data available to everyone to see. So you want to save what you're doing because you're not done. That's when you use the save button. If you use the save button, you're not ready to file and you have nothing to submit to SAR, so you haven't actually completed your task. The file button obviously does exactly that. You click on the file button and it will allow you then to it will then save that whole submission and it will give you a ready to submit declaration. It's at this stage that we would suggest that you make a backup. I'm just going to skip back a few slides and show you where those things are. So under utilities, there is a location called database utilities. There you have backup your data, create a backup, restore a backup, and merge. So you're going to create a backup. And the reason why we suggest you do it before you do your actual submission is that in case something goes wrong and you need to go back to before the submission was made. So let's say perhaps something went terribly wrong and you actually need to do a complete resubmission. It's easier to go back to this backup and to work forward from it and to go to a past backup and try and create the situation. Okay. So at this stage, we would suggest that you make a backup and then using submit to SARS menu item here. Once the backup is completed, obviously, you're going to use the submit to SARS. It's going to give you a list of all available submissions, and you're going to submit it to SARS. Again, you're going to need to use your e-filing login username and password, and it's going to come back to you with a message to say that it's been successfully submitted. The important factor of this last point is that in our experience, even though you have that message to say your submission has successfully been made, we would strongly urge you to use your e-filing login, to log into e-filing, to go and find the proof of submission. Now, that's under your PA1 maintenance area on the easy file. So on e-filing. I'm sure that we can assist if you need to know where that is. But it's imperative that you get that proof of submission for the period, as well as your message on screen to say that it's been submitted. We have noticed in the past that somewhere along the line, SARS system occasionally, and I do mean occasionally, we haven't seen it very frequently, but occasionally something happens in the interim and the actual submission does not register on the SARS maker. So everything on your screen on your local machine shows correctly, but it's not registered with SARS. And while you could argue that, with screenshots and having your backups and all those kind of things, it's really not worth the effort. Just going to get that proof of submission. And on a final note, for the submission is once you have your live submission, once your submission has been made, please make another backup. You always want to have more backups than no backups. So I can't say this enough times. Please make your backups of your easy file. If you cause in the gray hair, if you use a backup through corruption or a machine disappearing or something along those lines. So make your backups, put them in a secure location, and make sure that you have record of the admin username and password, or the admin password is the admin username. Just because if anything goes wrong and you need to resubmit certificates, or you need to go and look at a certificate from 5 years ago, if you have the backups, it's much, much easier. If you are now struggling to find backups, it can be really tough to try and get that information. And that brings us to the end of part 1. hand over to Charlene in a second. I would just like to have a look at that question that we have. See if I can answer it. Okay, so we can't edit the last 6 months of ETR. There's no message. It's calculated but not utilized. It don't utilize. How do you reflect those utilized? Okay. So if it was declared on the EMP501s, it will automatically be refunded. So if it was included as not utilized on the 201s, it will be refunded. There is, on the EMP501, you can sometimes edit to show that it has been utilized, but that's going to leave you theoretically in an overpaid state anyway. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly. I don't know if it's Lara or Laura. If you don't mind, would you mind just dropping me an email with the detail, and then maybe I can give you a call directly and we can discuss the situation in a little bit more detail. That would be great. Okay, I will now hand over to Charlene. And, yeah, we can get that side of the equation underway.
Morning all. Just bear with me while I share my screen with you. There we go. Can you just please let me know if you can see it? Sorry, I've got a new computer and it is not working for me. There we go. Can you just please confirm that you can see my screen? Okay, thanks. And I note there was a comment with regards to the sound quality. Is it a bit better now? Okay, I don't seem to be hearing anything further back, so I'm just going to proceed.
It was my voice that was the problem.
Was it your voice? I'm just going to blame it on allergy season. Okay, for the purpose of my presentation, I'm going to be running through the extraction of all the reports as well as the file on VIP, and I'm going to be using VIP Premier. The process is pretty similar for the online platform for the Business Solutions online VIP package as well. Mainly the main difference is that you do not have to make hard copy backups and hard copy copies of the company for the relevant tax years.
Sorry,
yes.
I am not seeing your screen, so I'm not sure if anyone else can.
Oh dear, that's not a good sign. Let's just double check. Sorry, because I've got a new computer, which is not entirely. Let me just see. There we go. I had share screen. There we go. There we go. Can you see it now?
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Sorry for that. Okay, so there we go. We've got confirmation now that everybody can see it. So I'll be using the VIP Premier package to demonstrate the extraction of the reports and the files for you. Basically, before you roll over into your March pay period on Premier, it will prompt you to make a copy of the system for tax purposes. And I always also like to keep copies of all your previous tax years because it's easier to extract data, especially with UI19s and all of that, 12-month reports, audit reports, as VIP doesn't have a rolling period system, whereas Psiber, you can extract reports as far back as you've got data on the system. So these are just the basic steps through. Most of you would be very familiar with it. Please do shout if there's any questions on this. So it would just basically prompt you to do the copy system. You would locate the area where you want to save the system. You will just follow all the prompts again on the screen. It's also advisable to label your file according to your various tax years so that you have your copies as tax year 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017 for reference purposes. Again, it will create your shortcut, save it on your desktop, or alternatively, maybe get your IT team involved that you can actually save it on your organization server. Again, also, we need to be cognizant of the POPI regulations with regards to employee data, as well as the length of time that we need to keep these backups for. We've noticed now that from time to time, SARS comes back with queries going back quite a few years, not the mandatory 10 years. We've had instances where they go back as far as 2002. And it's just always useful if you do have this information somewhere stored, and instead of having hard copy files where you have to pull out your data. So this is just part of the process of making your backup of your copy system. The nice thing with VIP is it actually gives you all the prompts, and it's not very difficult to follow. It's very user-friendly. VIP has got another function that's really, really nice for your submission preparation. It's got, under our utility screen, it's got something called Rsa Submissions, which has a automated process flow for your SARS submission, as well as your OID or QUID submissions. Okay. It gives you a nice screen with various steps. It basically almost forces you to print all the relevant reports. You can skip this step by just purely running your reports and doing it quicker, but I find that this is a much nicer way or a much easier way, and you retain your data in a better format. Okay, the first step that you would do is validate your company information. Carl ran through this as well. Normally, your information on this doesn't change for companies. The only area that sometimes does change, which needs to be updated quite frequently, is the contact person details. Especially for IRP5 contact person, we found that sometimes notifications are sent from SARS to this email address, and if this is not updated frequently, or you have people in your organization leaving, you get a new payroll person or a new finance person, and for instance, the email address doesn't get updated, things go into a big black hole and nobody's receiving queries or follow-ups from SARS, which could lead to some problems. Okay, this is the minute you get to this screen, it will tell you this is your final period in your tax year. You confirm everything. Just a area of caution especially would be for wage companies, to make sure that you are in your last week, that you have your 52 weeks for the year, as this could also, sometimes you haven't rolled over, or you're missing a week and you need to do a zero run, for instance, for the last week of the month, if you haven't actually followed your weeks through correctly, which could be a problem. But you would have picked that up when you rolled over into your first week for your wages for the new year. But it is just an area of caution to take note of. Okay, and then you will start with the validation of your employees. You can also run this report from your normal reporting section, and this is the same report that Carl was referring to, where it will give us basic errors or basic information that you have missed on the system. It sometimes happens that when you do take-ons, you don't have all your data for your new employees. Things like tax numbers, again, is a very big red flag, or you don't have a proper residential address, physical address, and this actually just preempts the hassles when you pull it into the easy file system, where you would then get failures and warnings. If there is any information that is outstanding, it would then give us the error report in this format, and it will give you the employee number and what information is missing. Sometimes it's just something as simple as a postal code that's incorrect, that when you captured it with 3 digits instead of 4 digits. Here is your additional validation information that needs to be updated as well, which could pop up on your reports on the VIP side. Your tax status, UIF status. There's quite a few areas that these are normally things that are on more complicated payrolls, but that can cause a headache. One area that needs to be taken note of with this filing season is your employees with foreign income. There is a new code that has been added that needs to populate on your IRP5s. They call it's code 4587, which is basically an information code that ties back in with your foreign income codes, your 3651s, and needs to just it could pop up as an error if things haven't been set up correctly. Another area that could cause some tripping up with this submission period is the retirement fund contributions. Quite a few organizations had payment holidays, etc., and you just need to be cognizant that everything has been handled correctly on your payroll to ensure that your contributions tie back in with your provident fund schemes reconciliations as to what is being declared from their side, and that you've actually applied this fully and correctly. It will then, once you've completed that, you get to the basic reconciliation procedure, where you pull out a EMP501 reconciliation report, again, where you then balance it back either to your EMP501s as well as your EMPSA statement. And VIP's got the functionality where you can then basically print your 3 reports that is very useful in this process: your 12-month report, your history report, and your ETI history report. Again, as Carl noted, there's quite a few challenges with especially ETI and the validation of the age bracket that was dropped during the hard lockdown period, and as well as the SDL flagging for the SDL cancellation. We've picked it up on quite a few payrolls where people hadn't actually reactivated the SDL contributions after the lockdown period, and has now actually, well, they picked it up a month or 2 later, and there's discrepancies on the SDL which has to be rectified or had to be rectified. This is the report generates into Excel, which is really, really nice. You can then actually go and do a quick manual recon from your EMP501s that you actually paid, or even your EMPSA statement, and you can then, if you need to, get this signed off by your finance person, or you can, it's also very nice to keep on record for your auditors when they come to. And then the other nice fact is then that once you actually do your EMP501 recon on the system, if you've done this beforehand, you will know where there are problems, and you can actually investigate this prior to completing your submission and do some further investigation on any issues that might arise, as it gives it to you per month. If the EMP501 balances, you can proceed with creating your IRP file for the importation into EasyFile. However, if you have differences, you need to determine where your differences are coming from. And again, the nice thing with the report that you've extracted and completed in Excel and balanced is it'll show you which month it is. You can go back to your history report in VIP, and you can then trace it back to which individual it was that had the issues. You can see whether it was just an error where somebody had gone and made a change without to test something, as it does sometimes happen in VIP when you roll over or before you roll over, if the payroll hasn't been locked. And then you can make a decision from there as to whether what action needs to be taken, or whether it was purely a issue where someone had actually just paid the incorrect amount over to SARS. This does happen. We all have finger trouble, and then you would need to actually do the correction when you do your submission. Next step now is to pull your IT3 IRP5 report. We pull it out in a test format. You select the tax year end run, or you can run it via your reports menu, report 58 IRP5 IT3s. Again, you need to select whether it's going to be for your tax year end. there is also a few other reports that you can do, but the periodic reconciliation is for your mid-year submission. You select your type of run. It's advisable always to do a test run before, because VIP sort of like locks it with the live runs. Do your test report. You can also select your current company or multiple companies if you have more than one company with the same PAYE number. For instance, if you have a commission company, a salaried company, a exec payroll, and a wage company, you can do all of this in one file for ease of reference. Some people prefer to do a separate file and pull each file in separately because they have different people responsible for different payrolls. They need to obtain different information and then consolidate it all together in the end when they do their final import. This is just the multiple company selection screen. You will need the passwords for every single company to actually be able to do this. Again, this is a segregation of duties, and normally your main company will have, or your main user will have the password to be able to access all of this and do a consolidated report or a consolidated file. You need to just review the company details as well to check that all information has been entered correctly. This pulls through from your basic company information screen. So if all of that information is correct, this should pull through correctly, but it's just always good to do a double check on this. You can select the reports that needs to be printed. The IRP5 IT3 Recon report will print a list of all your employees with the year-to-date amounts as well as the IRP5 codes. There's also a summary report. These are all nice reports to keep for audit purposes. I would, however, not generate the IRP5 certificates until I do the live run, as it's purely for record purposes, and I would rather have a final report. Again, this is up to you. You can also opt to have your printing parameters set to print your terminated employees first, because that might be easier for you for sorting purposes. Alternatively, you prefer to have it by department because each department has its own HR section. This is all entirely up to you. We select the range of employees only available. This is only available when you do a test run. When it does a live run, it automatically just generates it and pushes everything through. You select your location where you want to save this. Again, depending on where you store your VIP drives, be it on a C drive, be it on a server. Sometimes you need to just check with your IT team as to what the processes is, where we need to do this. And also now I would suggest discussing it with your POPI manager in order to comply with the new regulations that's come into effect. Again, just a note of caution, no spaces and no special characters, otherwise the file will not save properly. You will have the file now ready that you can import into the system. Sorry. It will generate it. This is just the samples of what the reports look like. Again, you can print everything to PDF or to a printer, depending on what your preferences are. This is the sample IRP5. Again, that you can keep for distribution. But again, I would only do this when I do my live run and I know everything's ready to go in for distribution to staff. Then once your file is extracted, you can pull it into easy file. It prompts you to save it on a local drive or a C drive, access your easy file. Carl had gone through all of this. I've just got a few screenshots here with regards to where we go, what we do. Process is exactly the same. You log in, you import a payroll file. You find the file where you've saved it. Click on open, it will pull in. The payroll file will either pass with a validation. Due to the fact that VIP basically pulls it firstly as a test file, you then need to go back into VIP. rerun the file as a live run, or alternatively, you can amend the test denomination on the actual file to live and pull it in if you don't actually want to do it on the system. But I would suggest doing it on the system, and then it will do your final IRP5s, and everything, your pack will be ready to file away. You would then, if the payroll file has passed with warnings, you can go and investigate what your warnings is. Again, like Cole noted earlier, a lot of the time it's things like income tax reference numbers. It is things like addresses, postal codes. It's marginal errors. If you have a fail, however, you will need to go and investigate further. Go back to your error report. It would give you specific errors tying into things, for instance, maybe like a tax directive number that's not been added. It could be a code that's not tying in fully. One of the things that we picked up as well is, again, on the ETI, the age validation or the age verification code, as Carl then noted, that you need to then correct. And that is basically all from me. I noticed there's a chat. Okay, there we go. We've sorted those problems out. I don't know if there's any further questions. Or any further comments that anybody's perhaps got that they would like to touch on. I don't know, Carl, if you've got perhaps anything additional to add that I might have missed on my side.
That was all great. Thanks, Charlene. I see there's a couple of comments asking for recordings of the webinar and that sort of fun stuff. They are loaded onto our YouTube channel, so you are more than welcome to go and view them there again. I would imagine that you guys all have come via the login, so we will know who you are, and I will ask bookhandlers to please send out the link to the YouTube as soon as it has been uploaded. Other than that, I have nothing else. If there are no more questions, and Charlene, if you're happy.
No, I've got nothing further on my side. I think we covered most of it.
Yeah, it was a little bit rushed, so maybe if you get the YouTube videos, you can focus a little bit on into the areas that you're having concerns with. But by all means, you can email. I'm not entirely sure whether it was Priyanka who sent out the invitations. But if you don't have my email address or Charlotte's email address, I'm sure that you can email the person who you got the invitation from, and they will forward any queries on to us.
Okay, there we go. I'm just trying to see. There's nothing further here. So I think with that, we can just conclude.
Excellent. Thanks very much, guys. Have a lovely rest of your day.